Hi, I'm Catherine.
And I'm Gail, and welcome to Women Over 70 Aging Reimagined, our award winning weekly podcast. Visit Women Over 70 to learn about how you may become involved. Join Aging Reimagined Circle and enjoy free participation in our monthly programs. Thank you for listening. And this episode is sponsored by Steve Nasrallah, Compass Navigation Group, who's in the business of guiding people home. He builds strong relationships with clients so they can walk together through every step of the process.
Nice. And today we're happy to have Carol Remz with us in our studio. Now, Carol has impressive professional credentials, Master of Arts in Teaching and a PhD in Educational Technology. And throughout her distinguished 40-year career, Carol designed and developed training programs for Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, private businesses, and international nonprofits. But we're not going to talk about this part of Carol's life today. Instead, we're going to focus on what 80-year-old Carol calls the false narrative that the end of women's fertility marks the end of their sexuality. Carol proclaims just the opposite in her book, Best Sex Ever. Let's see that wonderful cover, Carol. Best Sex Ever After Menopause. She proclaims just the opposite in this book. And this book, and I'm quoting, is a call for action for postmenopausal women who desire a more fulfilling and passionate postmenopausal life. And Carol offers intimate personal glimpses into how she has reclaimed intimacy and passion in her own life. And she provides well-researched approaches and tools to support empowered sexuality for women in their later lives. So welcome, Carol Remz, to Women Over 70. Delighted to have you.
Thank you.
And thanks to your husband and publicist, Larry Sagan, for referring you to us. Appreciate that. You know, Carol, let's start with, there's a lot of talk now among researchers and sex educators about sexual activity for women or older women. And yet, I think fewer women are willing to tell their own stories publicly. And you are. So what compels you to tell your story at this age in life?
Yeah. I really have to go back at least 10 years. When I went through perimenopause, which was 35 years ago, I was in my mid-40s. I had just remarried. I was only married then for 5 years. And perimenopause, well, sex is a taboo subject, and perimenopause was unspoken and untaught. So going through this process, I didn't know who to tell or talk to. There were women my age or older, and we were all sort of suffering in silence. When I got through it, and during the process of going through perimenopause, what hit me, which hits a lot of other women, vaginal dryness and a loss of libido over time because our estrogens are changing. We're losing our hormones. At the time, again, the only hormone that I could consider was Premarin, which was pregnant horse's urine. I have sort of a psychological reaction to that. I'm not saying that it's bad. As a matter of fact, my current research says it wasn't so bad. But I just couldn't wrap my head around that. So I sort of suffered through everything on my own. And I did heal, and there was sort of a lot of different serendipitous things that happened in that process. Number one, when I was in my late 50s, early 60s, I was starting to get very flushed in my face. And I went to my dermatologist, and he said, "I'm really sorry to have to tell you this, Carol, but you've got a condition called rosacea, and it is incurable." And I like to wear makeup, so I went looking online to see what I could find that dermatologists would recommend. And they did recommend some makeup. I looked at the ingredients, and there was something called sea buckthorn. I had no idea what that was. And it is an ancient shrub that's been used medicinally for thousands of years, and it claimed to help rosacea. So I started to take it these are bright orange berries. They're grown in different cold climates. I get mine from the Himalayas. And these orange berries, the flesh of the berry is made into a fruit oil, and the tiny seeds inside the berry are made into a seed oil. And you can take the oil by capsule. You can swallow it if you want to, just directly from the bottle. And I did that for about 4.5 months. It may have been 6. and the rosacea went away. And in reading about it, I also learned that it had other beneficial supports for our body, including our mucous membranes. And so it also helped me with vaginal dryness. So that was good. And I remember going to my gynecologist's office at the time. This was a number of years ago, and she's been tracking my plea for help. And when she's examining me, she said, "Okay, Carol, what's going on here? You're changed. You got normal mucosa." I was so excited. Now, the sexual desire, the interest in having relations with my husband, it was still kind of like not really there. And I basically said to Larry, "I'm really sorry, sweetie." He was 7 years younger, but I think this is something we're just going to have to expect given my age. Sorry you married an older woman. And again, life has a way of things happening to you, and some good stuff can come out of that. I got diagnosed with breast cancer. And after I had the lumpectomy, I had to have radiation treatment. And I had read, when I'd read about sea buckthorn, I had discovered that it was very good for radiation. And when Russia had the Chernobyl, that horrible nuclear reactor going off, and their astronauts also used sea buckthorn. So I took the oil, particularly the fruit oil, which is very dense, and after each x-ray treatment, I coated my chest with that fruit oil, and I didn't burn, and my skin didn't scale, and it was really quite amazing. Now, there was a psychological reaction to the radiation and to having cancer, and of course, we're now my mortality has now come up with a great big, sign in front of my face. And so at the time, Washington State had medical cannabis, and I was able to get a license for the medical cannabis, and it was wonderful. Again, cannabis has a long history of being used for medicine and for all kinds of things, and including as an aphrodisiac. And so I took the cannabis for my stress, for sleeping at night, and all those good things. And I also learned, wow, I think I'm getting turned on again. After I healed, and this is the story that Larry likes to tell, I don't always repeat it, but I will for the women who are over 70 who come to your website. We were making love. We had a 2-hour marathon. It was absolutely amazing. And I kind of said to Larry, "This is the best sex I've ever had." And then he said, "After menopause." And he said, "Write a book." And I went, "Okay." And before I could protest, because I'm thinking I've done a lot of writing, but I'm not writing like that. He said, "Get help." And again, the way just things worked out, there was a website that was being run by a woman here in Seattle, Washington, who is helping authors and writers connect without really a monetary incentive, because she wanted to put these kinds of people together. So I wrote an ad for a writer, and Aunt Molly Carter answers my ad. She's 36 years younger. She had interested in sex when she was an adolescent. She became an intimacy coach, and she's also, I said, a medical health and research writer. It was a perfect partnership, living 3,000 miles away from me. And we really didn't physically get together for another 5 years, or maybe it was 6 years. But we definitely developed a very strong rapport and relationship and trust, and we meshed perfectly. And so I think that women do that with other women. So that's how it started. And it was through my research and in writing the book that I really had a lot of other things open up to me about sexuality, going through menopause, this feeling that we are too old, that we can't have these kinds of things any longer. That then resulted in the book, which took 8 years to write.
It took 8 years because
Well, the research I did, COVID came in, which actually was very positive for me for 2 reasons. Because Larry and I made a lot of love and developed and worked on our relationship. And I'm going to share something with you that's kind of sad, but it also made COVID positive for me. I only had one sister, older sister by 3.5 years. Her name was Judith. And she's in Connecticut. So during COVID, we couldn't see each other. It was always hard getting together because of the distance. But we almost spoke to each other every day. And if we didn't, it was every other day. And it was so nourishing for me to have that kind of closeness to her. And later, when it was all over and we went to visit her on Thanksgiving, my sister was complaining about a pain in her stomach, and it turned out to be cancer. And in 4.5 months, and COVID wasn't quite over, I was with her. My sister died. And so she also knew about the book. And she's always been my strongest supporter. And she always thought, Carol, there's nothing that you can't do. And she just said, I think it's great. Go ahead and don't let anybody stop you from writing your book.
That's great. Did you have any qualms about writing something so personal?
I did. And then I thought I had made a note about this. I needed to go back in time and figure out when it was when Roe versus Wade was overturned. And I'm 80 years old, so I lived in a time when I had to get my husband's permission for birth control, my first husband, when there were back alley abortions and women were dying. My mother told me what it was like growing up in the tenements of New York City for immigrant women who were having one baby after another and their health was seriously compromised. So for me, it just stirred up all my feminism and my want for equality and my anger at the misogyny that takes place. So that was the moment I said, what have I got to lose if I can help women? And I'm an educator. I'm a teacher. I believe that if I come across some valuable knowledge and skills, I want to share it. And I've been told I could have had some more humor in it but I know for me, it worked. And as I'm approaching women, I'm just feeling a wonderful recognition for the fact that, thank you, Carol, for sharing this with me, because you're not a particularly glamorous woman. You're not living a particularly glamorous life. I'm very privileged, and I accept all the privilege that we have in my life. But I'm really kind of right in the middle of most women. And so they're saying to me, you're like me, and I don't have a perfect marriage. I'm not perfect. Larry's not perfect. But we deeply love each other. And then I go back to the first word in my book and the last word in my book, which is love. Because when Larry said, write the book, and Molly and I got together and I decided I'm going to write about this, Molly's going to write about body know-how and our being affectionate with each other and learning about our sexuality, I said, I have to find out what the word love is that I want to be using. And I want it to be a verb, not a noun. And I couldn't find any dictionary definition that met that for me. So I made up my own. And I discovered that for me, it's accepting my vulnerabilities and the vulnerabilities of others. And then I began in alphabetical order to list all the different ways that people can connect. And it's got nothing to do with sex. The most important thing we all think about, which my sister did on her deathbed, was the people that she loved. So people that we love, we connect with appreciation, caring, commitment, compassion, contentment, empathy, fulfillment, friendship, kindness, laughter, optimism, patience, resilience, respect, more. And then I believe that we go into another dimension of love when we're really, really close to people. That could be somebody we met just yesterday or somebody that we've known for 25 years, where we have awe and courage and creativity and empowerment and enthusiasm and joy and transcendence. We feel like being with somebody, we're in another dimension of goodness. And so for me, that was the foundation of everything that I was going to do. And I think that's the love that gets us through almost 40 years of marriage come June 1st. Because if you've been in a long-term relationship, you're going to change. There are pressures from the outside of the world that affect you. But the good news about women, when we get to be mature, we've accepted all that. We have this gift of somehow keeping everything in balance. And I don't want women to lose that optimism, because going through perimenopause can be hell. And the other thing I learned in my research was so impactful. It only happened, I only learned it a few months before I went to print. This was the research scientist, a neuroscientist called Dr. Lisa Mosconi. And she has written in her book that all human beings, when they go through puberty, their brain changes. All women who go through a pregnancy, their brain changes. And all women going through perimenopause and menopause have a brand new brain. I thought, wow. And it is a really cool new brain. I also had to write out what our brand new brain gives us, which I think is so exciting. Emotional mastery, not overreacting to negative situations, not sweating the small stuff, caring less about things that no longer serve us. We get more self-confidence, more determination, more sense of our worth, more ability to sustain joy, and more empathy.
You've just said what Women Over 70 podcast is all about.
Yes.
There you are.
It is. It's so true. It is so true.
You know, given our audience, most of us are older women, but I think it's helpful if you could just identify what are some of those outdated myths about sex and aging that are still ingrained in so much of our society. What are some of those?
I think the most horrible thing is that we get no education. I did not know the word clitoris until maybe I was 30. We talk about, there's a show, that Vagina Monologues. Vagina's our birth canal, you know. We don't get an education, and we don't hear it from our parents. They don't talk about it. There's shame, there's embarrassment. It's not considered polite. We all think that somebody else is doing it better, right? So it isn't true. So all I can do is I just spoke from my own experience, and I make it very clear in the book that every individual that will read my book, and I think this is true for every woman, you have to decide what you want. As women, we've subjugated ourselves to our children, maybe our spouse, our family. We go all out in our jobs, and we have to start with number one. We have to start with self-love and self-care. And we're not conditioned, or does society encourage us to do that? We're always the ones who are making, for sort of this broad generalization, I believe that we're the ones, maybe we're supposed to be made that way, to be overgenerous and put our needs secondary to everybody else around us.
In your book, you've got this, I read your book online, and you have this wonderful blend of cutting edge research and your own experience, and you weave those together so wonderfully. So tell us about you have 3 empowering sections in your book. What are those 3 sections?
Well, number one is our brain is our most important sex organ. It's all here. Our brain is the command central for everything in our body. Our heart may be going beating, but if our brain ain't working, we're really not a human being. So it's everything about the brain. And I also talk about how thoughts and emotions matter. And with the power of our brain, we can change our brain and change our life. We can do that. There's a concept called, it's not a concept, it's scientific fact, neuroplasticity. Our brain changes to our thoughts and our actions. And I put in the research that shows people who have visualized something that they want. An Olympic runner who couldn't be in a trials, but watched videos and then went to what she did in live running and got through. People who make a poster board of, I want to be president of my company, I want my company to do this. We can do that to our brain. So I say to the women that want to have this, write down what you want. Write down the qualities of love that you want to have for yourself and for anybody else that you're going to be having sexual pleasure with. And look and see and remember, I can check a lot of things and say, most of the time I have courage and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I have lots of patience and many times I don't have any patience at all. We are imperfect, but it's real. If you set your mind to what you want and you do things to make that active, you read, you learn, you talk to people, you do things that move you closer to your goal, you can achieve it and you can change. And the second section is called remedies. There are physical changes in our body that are very important. So I also cover first the brain and then remedies. And I do discuss hormones. I discuss sea buckthorn, what healed my vaginal dryness and also helps me health-wise. And I also discuss cannabis. And I'm careful about that because not every state in our country has legal cannabis. And a lot of people my age take medication. I don't. So it's extremely important, given our ages, if you're taking medication, you must check that, and you can do that online with cannabis. I also give people some directions for how you may want to try that out, and it may not work for you. And the third section is what I call in the flesh. This is Molly's section, where she gives us the sex education that we never got and explains our genitalia, male and female. And also together we talk about how do you play with pleasure. It's something that you're not in bed, ready to go to sleep, and your husband comes into bed and starts to, kiss you and wants some pleasure. And I go, It's something that you go to, that you plan. Is what Esther Perel says, which I think is so important. You're intentional about your planning. My husband is the romantic. I'm not. He always makes things very romantic. I'm more interested in getting down to action. But at least I say to him, okay, honey, let's have a play date on Saturday night. Or what are you doing on Thursday morning? Because they're both retired. So to me, it's anticipated, planned for it. And then it's a matter of giving and receiving pleasure. So, and the very, very last thing in that final section in the flesh is, I end up by saying, what you want. And that's it. 3 sections and 3 chapters for each section.
This notion about the sex act and pleasure. And so have you and other women kind of redefined or reimagined what is pleasure, and is it always going for orgasm, or what is it about?
No, and it's not also, I love what you said, the sex act. Hollywood tells us the sex act is much younger men and women, getting the hots for each other, and he's basically sticking his erect penis for intercourse into her vaginal canal. That is not a sex act. Pleasure is kiss, it's touch, it's smell, it's hugging, it's holding hands. And again, and if you are, I have a definition for sexual pleasure. Okay. But not everybody, but it fits me. Sex is pleasure that is arousing. So you have to be aroused. And if you're not aroused, then you're not going to be aroused. It's arousal. It's sensual. It's arousing, sensual, erotic, orgasmic, ecstatic, transcendent, blissful, transformational. Now, you can take any one of those components. Somebody could say, I just met a wonderful woman, and she told me her 89-year-old mother has a boyfriend now. She says they're always holding hands, and they're always hugging, and they're always kissing each other. I'm sure she's experiencing bliss and transcendent feelings, and she's changed for that. And she's being aroused. Not necessarily are they having, sexual intimacy with the genitalia, but she's getting that kind of pleasure. And so it can be any of those things. And it can be also, and a lot of women have a very hard time orgasming. The statistics that Molly put in the book are not surprising. Something like only 35% of the women have orgasms. And because
For women or
women.
women?
And if I'm wrong on that, believe me, it's less than 50%. Okay. It is just really sad. Because again, we get a wrong picture of what that is. And so a woman has to know her own body and what gives her pleasure. And it takes time, and it takes consideration. And it isn't, when you're very young, there's a huge difference between when you're young in your 20s and 30s and maybe into your 40s than when you're 50, 60, and 70. Grant that. But the good news is maybe you will come slower. Maybe you'll be aroused slower. You can have many more pleasurable time because of the not rushing, not pushing, understanding you're only into feeling what feels good and feeling the connection. And that's all you have to worry about or be concerned about.
And Carol, I'm just listening with my mouth open. This is so so wonderful to hear, and to hear someone express sexual pleasure this way. And I'm wondering if you have anything in your book about those of us who don't have partners and who are still interested in sex.
I most certainly do. And I can tell you right now, yeah, absolutely. In fact, it starts with your own pleasure. And fantasy is the best. I have some of the best fantasies with all kinds of men who are different personalities than my husband and different personality. And women can do that. We have wonderful imaginations, and we can give ourselves pleasure, and we can have fantasies, and absolutely. So we certainly, both Molly and I, strongly recommend that. And just because I have a partner doesn't mean I've stopped. My husband hates the word masturbation. I say, go you, Larry, you're so right. It's a hard word. He prefers the word self-pleasure. And many times I still self-pleasure myself. Why not? Absolutely. Absolutely. I so encourage women to do that. Absolutely. And it's a lot easier sometimes than having to live with somebody, right? And they could compromise in your relationship.
Definitely. Right. So, Carol, are you thinking at all about your age? How are you thinking about the decades to come here?
That's a good question. I was so excited to turn 80. Yeah, nobody's asked me that question before, Gail. Good for you. I think at my age, and maybe I can speak for all the other wonderful women who you've interviewed who are over 70, we appreciate every day. It's a gift. I appreciate my memories that I have. I don't want to go back. I don't want to change anything. And I just savor every day so much more than I ever did when I was younger. I'm also accepting the realities of my aging, like the troubles that Larry and I both have, using the technology, or I have short-term memory loss issues. Somebody will tell me their name 3 times. They could write it out for me and I may, forget. But on the whole, I think this is just, I don't want it to come any sooner. I also want to say to women, don't be scared or don't be frightened. Look forward to growing old. I mean, it is another part of your life if you are granted the privilege of living a good and long and healthy life. Take advantage of it.
Yes, for sure. And you can, there's all types of health, right? You had cancer, I had cancer. And yet here we are still living our best lives.
Right. We're so fortunate.
Yes.
And we're also, I think that, that first time I had breast cancer twice, and I've had friends who didn't survive breast cancer. I had a very hard time calling myself a survivor because I just felt that I wasn't, because some people have gone through just hell and back cancer.
Right.
But when you first hear that word, the first thing that comes to mind is, oh my God, I'm going to die. And I had that reaction. And then when I got through it, and even with the second time, it went like, okay, beat it the second time. Okay, here I am again. And gratitude for the people that helped me, for the research that was applied for my healing and all of that. So I think women are amazing, and that we get better as we get older. And I just think it's such a gift. And what you're doing, I think, is so amazing. I mean, it's just really incredible. Thank you. And I get to be gushy. Is that okay?
That's all you're
I don't myself back anymore. Sometimes people say, I had one of my first jobs. I was a manager and I just got a promotion and I was getting feedback from my boss. And the first thing he said to me was, I'll never forget this, Carol, you're too enthusiastic. Oh my God. Okay. This was probably in the early 90s, late 80s. And I thought to myself, at first my brain couldn't even wrap my head around it. And I thought about maybe I laughed too much. Maybe I don't know what it was. I did not restrain myself properly in high executive meetings. And then I said, damn it, I don't care. I don't care. How can you be too enthusiastic? But the good news is, again, the decorum and the kind of rules that I had to follow when I was a working manager in corporate America is very different now. Much more informality, okay, in the business world. Sometimes when I see people going to work, I say, I could never get away wearing that to work. So that's that.
Tell us the name of your book one last time.
Okay. Sex Ever After Menopause. And the subtitle is Transforming Your Sexual Pleasure Through Mindset with Healing and Aphrodisiac Plants.
It's just, thank you, Carol. This has just been wonderful. Wonderful.
Well, thank
Our
you.
audience will really, really appreciate your candor and your well-researched perspectives. And see buckthorn. That's a new one for me.
Yes, and you can go to my website, drcarolrems.com, and I talk about sea buckthorn. And I have worked out a relationship with the company, which has been helping my health. They give a very nice discount if you sign up, and they're going to give you 5% extra, 20% off if you say Carol sent you. They know that I just think this was, again, I'm so grateful that I found this particular wonderful plant. And I'm a big promoter and fan of that. But I also have friends now who are also healing with some different hormonal therapy, which again was not available to me. So I didn't have any other option, and I felt, it also helped other parts of my skin and your mucous membranes and dry eye and all kinds of things. So your liver, whatever. So thank you.
You.
Yeah.
Very welcome. And listeners, we'd like to see more of you at our monthly online programs. Make your voice heard as we together change the conversation about women aging. Visit Aging Reimagined Circle at womenover70.com. And if you like this podcast, you may also love Jennifer Fink's Fading Memories. It's a podcast for caregivers of loved ones with dementia. It provides insights and guidance on communicating effectively, managing stress, and coping with grief and loss.
Yeah, that's a good one.